Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar with FlowForma Process Automation and Pontem Innovations on how to use process data to drive better visibility, decision making and problem solving. Before we get started, I would like to take care of some housekeeping tips and just some general tips for viewing today's webinar as well. The webinar is being recorded today, and if you have any trouble logging in or any problems with audio, please email info@flowforma.com for assistance. Throughout the webinar, your lines will be muted, but you can use the Q&A function on your right-hand side to ask questions, which we ask at the end. After the webinar, we will send you a copy of the recording, and we would really appreciate it if you could fill in the short feedback form at the end as well. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So I'm delighted to be joined by Shay O'Connor, who's Head of Solutions here at FlowForma. He's a highly skilled professional in the IT industry and has significant experience in providing clients with analysis, design, and implementation of business development solutions, particularly the no-code FlowForma process automation tool. Rick Dowell also joins us. He's the president and co-founder at Pontem Innovations. Rick has an extensive background in a senior operational leadership role and board governance. Rick also has a proven track record of achieving qualitative operation improvements and business growth. And finally, we have Cameron Fox, also from Pontem Innovations. He is the director of process solutions there. Cameron joined Pontem in 2019 to lead their clients' adoption of data analytics, digital workflow, and process automation technology. Welcome, guys.
Great to be here.
Hi.
Thanks, Ursula.
So Shay, thanks very much, guys. So Shay, I'll pass it on to you and we'll get this webinar started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. So here in FlowForma, we've been endeavoring for years to help organizations with their goal of digitization, be that in a small way or a large way. We deal with so many different types of projects, but our main focus was always on that area of enabling people to get digitized. Now, there's a full loop in this, and what tends to happen is that the people who are using the systems are one element of the scenario. However, those who wish to make decisions upon the day-to-day work and those who wish to see results of the day-to-day work, generally at management level, supervisory level, etc., they like to see nice, clear information. And that is why today we wanted to nearly close the loop on a journey for an organization where they would digitize, but also where they would represent the information that they gather, the clean information that they gather in a nice, presentable fashion. And the guys in Pontem are gurus in this area. So just wanted to kick off and ask just Rick, from your experience, integration, how have you found this and what is your experience about the necessity for integration?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and one that a lot of our clients are constantly talking about is around and trying to understand is how in their business can they tie together these four items that often get looked at sort of separately or in silos. And our experience is definitely that the relationship between these four areas, being process automation, analytics, and strategy, is ultimately what drives performance and efficiency in operations. And so I want to dive in a little bit on the details of each of these. So I'm actually going to work backwards. So on the strategy side, this is the key for all businesses, right? This is the output, the key thing that each business is trying to achieve, and it's tied to all actions and outputs a company is looking at achieving, is tied to the strategy. So I think everybody has a good appreciation of why that's so important. So if we move backwards one to the analytics, I mean, this is that measurement of how we're doing. The scorecard of, hey, are we being successful in terms of meeting some of our strategic objectives? And that often takes the form of leading, lagging indicators, things of that nature. So from there, if you work backwards further, there's the automation side. And in if you think back 20 years, the ability to sort of track, hey, how are we doing as a company? There was just a ton of manual effort that was required to pull that information. to get a sense of not just collecting it and then making sense of it, compiling it, summarizing it. And the reality is the tools out there now mean that manual effort is going to, is not really required, or is at least significantly reduced. But as I'm sure a lot of people feel, a lot of organizations still are spending a ton of time on that manual effort. And we're going to talk further about that. So, instead of spending those hours compiling that information, what if you spent those hours on the action items associated with what you're finding out? And I think that's a key piece for us at Pontum, and obviously what FlowForma is built on is that idea of, can we get information into one system at one time and then spread it out in a way that it's usable by different departments in different ways? And then we take that back to the very beginning, the process. And I would suggest the process is the foundation, the core of what makes good companies successful. It's how work gets efficiently done. And this is where sustainable, consistent, predictable results come from. And, if we tie it back, we often talk about in Pontum, good analytics is tied to good process. So what data do you need? What format is it in? Where do you get it from? How are you going to use it? Once you have it, what are you going to do with it, from an action item perspective? So all these things tie together in a way that if you look at them as an integrated system, it really starts to tie together and make a huge difference. So that's been our experience, and I want to spend a bit of time about talking about these in a way that shows how they can tie together, as opposed to, oh yeah, we'll do strategy separately, then we'll have a separate session on our reporting, and then processes over here. These all need to be talked about together.
They're great 4 steps, I have to say. And I particularly like this illustration in regards to the between automated process and the analytics and dashboards, the quadrants that you can end up with. And I'm sure people will resonate with some of the examples you have of these.
Yeah, definitely. I want to spend a bit of time just talking about this 2x2 matrix, and I'll even orientate you to the axis to start. So, you look at the y-axis, that's automated process. So as we move up, that means that we're more automated in our processes. And then on the x-axis, the data analytics, dashboard reporting. As we move out to the right, more detailed and sophisticated dashboard reporting. So I'm going to start in the bottom left corner, which is the chaos, high risk, bear, and uncertainty. So I think it's fair to say this is a world nobody wants to live in. However, unfortunately, I bet we all have lived in this world at some point or another. And some of the ways that I would describe it from my experience is stressful, unpredictable, frustrating, and ultimately, I think a word that wraps it up into one, if I could pick one word to wrap all that up and say, it's reactive. We're just reacting all the time to things that are coming at us. We're constantly sitting there with that fire extinguisher, and it's challenging. So let's all say we don't want to be there. Let's see if we can move somewhere else. So I'm going to move up to the top left, which is the poor visibility on organization performance, but more automated process. So in this example, there's actually not a ton of visibility on how you're doing. So it's hard to have an understanding around forecasting. So in general, you actually have more process. So your foundation is pretty good. But what ends up happening is you're spending a lot of time on manual work to provide the insight, right? And so it's hard to tell stories to your organization about, listen, all this good work we've done on the process side. And I'm sure FlowForma has a lot of examples of clients who have really made huge strides on their processes, but when they're trying to tell a stakeholder, like, hey, look at everything we have, the ability to tell that story can be difficult, ends up being a lot of manual work to pull information together, just to tell that story.
We would have had a lot of, I'm thinking of one organization that took them a week to put together their KPIs for every month.
Yeah.
Which seems a bit mad.
Yeah, exactly. So then we can move to the bottom right corner, which is unstructured data and inconsistent reporting, but that's tied to low processes. So you actually have a fair bit of reporting that has to happen. And what ends up happening is it's in silos. So your process for doing that isn't going to be very sophisticated. It's going to be quite manual in nature. And you're really dependent on individual people in this scenario, right? Because that process isn't structured. So it's in somebody's head. So if you've ever been in an organization where somebody leaves and it's like, uh-oh, what are we going to do without Mary? You know, the answer is, I don't know. I guess we're going to find out next week when she's gone. But there's all these things that she used to do that nobody really understood because it was in somebody's head. And I think we've all felt that when somebody leaves. So the
Yeah.
risk from an organization perspective is actually quite high in this case, even though it feels like at certain times, hey, our process is pretty well working and we're doing some good reporting. So it seems like we're doing well, but the same piece applies. Tons of manual work, tons of risk actually related to your processes because they're very dependent on individual people. So yeah, and
yeah, and it's funny when I'm seeing this and I'm thinking of some of our example cases and some of the organizations we've dealt with. They don't always fall into one category. So they have snippets of some, like some departments are chaos and some departments have a bit of poor business, some have unstructured reports. And you hit the nail on the head with the whole siloed scenario where you do have certain departments to say, a department head goes, I'm not standing for this. I'm actually going to put something in place here. And they end up having great data and great reporting. And then another department is totally the opposite.
Yeah, it's such. Yeah, go ahead, Cam.
I would just say, yeah, like sometimes you see like one department could be further ahead on the process side, one department could be further ahead on the data side. But what we find in practice as we're implementing it is how, like when they're integrated together in that way, it's sort of like a finding that you have come through in a process initiative often leads to a data change. And then the same thing goes the other way when you're talking about, you know, now that someone's actually able to see a report, the findings on that report are actually now driving process changes. And that's when you really start to, I think, move to the upper right portion of that quadrant.
Yeah, but and again, it's funny. Some people, the chaos area, I'd say a lot of people wouldn't admit to the chaos except for the actual users. You know, usually the users would go, "This is chaotic," you know, whereas management might you know have to pull the sort of political line of, "Oh no, we're in control. We do this is the way we always do it." It seems chaotic, where in reality, yeah, you know, you can always improve on all of that. And chaos, if you were to say chaos, and they wouldn't agree, but there's a big difference between having structured, unstructured, and the rest. At this stage, guys, I just wanted to get those who are online with us at the moment to, well, agree to having an interactive a poll. And I'd ask, yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, this is going to sit up here for a few seconds. It's quite straightforward, but hey, yeah, does your organization have clear reporting of all its business processes? Now, I'll leave this open for a few seconds more. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and move on. And we'll have the results of that. Interesting. So, guys, what are you? It's a fairly comprehensive 0 for yes, we have full visibility of all our business processes. I mean, in reality, you're going to have a lot of scenarios where I would say you're going to have few scenarios where you're going to have full visibility of all your business processes. But then a split between we can report on some, which is pretty cool, just over half, but don't have clear reporting over business processes, 44%. That's a pretty chunky percentage.
It is.
Would you agree with those?
I think so. I think that's in line with our experience, especially over the last 3 years and looking at organizations, looking at it from a reporting perspective, and then diving in on the processes, is that, you know, especially that idea on some of our business processes, you highlighted how certain areas and departments are actually pretty good, you know, and they're like, okay, we've made some strides. But then the challenge is they did some things that were very specific to their business, and even some of the nomenclature, the way they name things would be different in their area than other areas. So you run into this challenge of, if you're not using a common tool and approach, you get your processes become very focused on individual areas in a way that isn't as transferable. And if you think about it from a, you know, it comes back to that original slide. If you're thinking about this holistically from an organization perspective, you can actually tie these things together in a way that looks and feels the same across the organization, even though it is very specific to individual departments. So yeah, I guess this is actually in line with what I would have expected based on our.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. And then I guess on a lot of companies have the ability to create the reports, but then sometimes there's the time component that's required to build those reports, right? So sometimes if it's coming from multiple systems or different sources of information that are external to the organization, there's that time factor to consider as well.
Yeah. And I'll highlight, Shay, I don't know if we can go back to that slide with the quadrants again, but those people that say, no, we don't have clear reporting. Like, I have a story about that because I think it's instructive. If you're in that bottom left corner, where it has the chaos with high risk of error and uncertainty. Yeah, we have stories where we'll sit down. This has happened multiple times where you're with the CEO or a couple executives. It's like, hey, how's your reporting? And they're like, yeah, pretty good. We had a board meeting or executive meeting last week or last month, and we had some info, so we have a sense of where we're at. And then maybe there's a CFO or a controller, or somebody's responsible in the room or for the data in the room, and you look at them and you're like, yeah, how's the reporting? Did that come together pretty easily? And they sort of shift in their chair and they're like, yeah, no, it was okay. It was okay. But, if we've seen what's happened in the background, and what happened is that group was up till 10 p.m. the night before, slicing together information out of different Excel spreadsheets. And they also know that if there was an audit, or if you're going to do a more in-depth assessment of the data, there's a whole bunch of assumptions baked in there, right? And this is one of the challenges that happens without automated process, is that you run into a scenario where people are like, yeah, we're fine, and then all of a sudden they're not fine. And it's like, man, what happened? Why was that? So we'll dive in, but I'll just highlight that top right corner that I think we all want to live in. Like, that's where consistent, scalable, efficient, and predictable results and business components come from. So that's what we'll talk about, is how do you get to be proactive across the organization and build that foundation. So we'll get into some examples.
And highlighting the fact that, okay, we've got organizations out there, and even on today's webinar, who have some reporting, others that would like to have more, etc. What is the best way? And we just put together sort of 3 steps to give you an idea of how to get to the point where you can actually start becoming a bit more digitally efficient. So the first thing is finding an internal champion. Now, this is paramount. If there's no strategic support of having a digital initiative, you are really fighting a lonely and hard battle. The reality is, if you have an internal champion who's going to support the whole endeavor, they will have this strategic objective as primary in their goals for the organization. Now, this whole area is, Rick, you can come in on this as well. The reality is, it is a top-down, bottom-up transformation, because the leaders in an organization, they obviously set the goals, the high-level goals, but the users, they're the ones who have to put all of the different working items of the business. They all have to come together and start collecting all the correct information, etc., so that now we have usable data to support that clear objective and to help the guys giving them confidence of the fact that this was the right choice to make. And the one thing I always say to people, funny enough, is that I've never come across an organization who's gone down the digital route like this, the transformation route of digitizing their process. I've never come across an organization to start it and then reverse out of it. It's by far an improvement on the way to run an organization, and it's the way every organization will be run. It's just getting that first step now, get it going first.
No, I totally agree, and I've seen that as well with the organizations we work with. Once you go down this road, it's the benefits are so great. They're never going to turn around and be like, hey, we need to go back to spreadsheets or paper. And so they're always looking. Yeah, exactly. And so I'll just highlight, when that top down and bottom up, like I'll just highlight the characteristics. The top down is the strategy, executive leadership. It creates support, and it also creates budget, and it just gives people room to be like, hey, here's a timeline, and as an organization, we're going to move forward. The bottom up piece is equally important though, and I want to highlight that it's the characteristic of having somebody who understands the processes, have actually tried to improve some things at certain points, and is open to understanding we need to use some data, we need to actually automate and have some processes in place that can survive without an individual person, right? That it's for, or an organization. And so this is somebody who's willing to try new things. And so finding that person in a department that has, you know, a little bit more sophisticated is really valuable. But I'd say that biggest characteristic is somebody who's understands, you know, and is willing to think about what's possible, not just what's been done over the last 10 or 15 years. So if you had a person who still uses a highlighter and likes to mark papers for tracking invoices or things of that nature, that's maybe not the characteristics of the person that you're looking for. But yeah, but so just something to keep in mind. Somebody who's just like, yes, I know that we can do this better. That willingness to try and that attitude is by far the most important thing, because all the tools are actually, you know, FlowForma has built a tool that makes it relatively easy to try and bring forward some new processes.
Well, that's funny. Well, you led straight into this one, because basically this phased approach is really, really important with organizations, especially those that are hesitant about embracing, you know, and I get that. I mean, all you have to check out is the sort of law of diffusion, where you're going to have a really tiny percentage of innovators. You're going to have a slightly larger percentage of those that want to adopt early. But in order to get your business moving, you have to get the majority. You got to have that, the bigger in the bell curve, you got to get that big area. You got to get the majority of people, and they're in general risk averse. So how do you get them involved? Because this is the way to do it. You know, how you do it is by going at it one process at a time. I would say 80%, maybe even a bit more of our clients would do it in this way. Some who are more digitally advanced just go at it whole hog, but the majority go at it one at a time. Have you seen that, Rick?
Yeah, that's been our experience as well. And actually what when we're recommending to organizations and people how to move forward, it is exactly using this phased approach. And I can get into some details on why that is that, number one, I think there's a lot of people that have felt the pain of IT projects that haven't gone the way that people expected them, whether that's from a budget or time perspective. And that happens often because it's like, hey, we're going to do this massive project and then we're going to do this big bang launch, and it's really challenging. And so we've all felt it. I've been through 2 ERP implementations in previous roles, and it's painful. So using a phased approach, that's not what this is, right? It's very different. All of a sudden you're like, hey, let's take one process at a time, and now you reduce the risk because the scope is much less. So you can
Can you imagine that with a financial system like an ERP? If you were told, you know, we can put in 10% of the ERP system first, and then we'll increase it by 2% every month, and you know we'll have it all done by the end of the year, and it's all usable. There's no other system that I know of you can do that with.
Yeah, exactly. And it's right there. You can do that here, and then you get smarter, because the reality is, as you move forward, you're constantly learning new things, you're optimizing your process, your reporting, and you take those learnings into the next process. You can bring in.
As you're saying there, and as you're saying there, the learning that you're getting, right? You've got this ability then to demonstrate the success. So you're saying, not only are we doing this nice pace, but we can show you the results really quickly.
Yeah, exactly right. And you can bring in the right people at the right time. You know, you're making more informed decisions as you go. We often say, like, when you start, you have this list of 5 priorities, and it's like, okay, you know, we took on priority 1, now priority 2, maybe that's changed, or maybe it stayed the same, but usually there's some movement. What was priority 5 maybe now is priority 3, because you're like, oh, I see how these are tied together. There's another quick win here, or this group is really like, yes, this is going to make a huge difference for us. And as leaders in a business, that's really what you're after, is how do I make life easier and for my staff and more productive so that our outputs are better.
Yeah, and Cam, you get immersed in this all the time. I mean, this is basically, you see this constantly, where those that have come in and you put in a couple of processes, but now because they're seeing the data coming from the processes, they're going, okay, we just need to tweak this a bit. We just need to change that a bit, or you know, we actually need to change this process that we've had in place for 10 years, and people said don't fix it or because it's not broken, and in reality, it's got brakes in it.
Right. And yeah, and sometimes you don't notice those things until you sort of take that first leap and either get into the user testing or maybe you're even a couple months live and those things don't really come to fruition. You're like, oh, yeah, this would be way more optimized if we added in this component, because once you start to see how they all fit together, that's when some of those really, really incredible solutions start to take form.
Yeah, one of the first questions I ask people when they express their interest in digitizing is, like, how serious are you? How serious are you about this? Great. Do you have an example of what you'd like to start digitizing with? And when they have that sort of obvious example that they say, you know, honestly, if the guys saw this in operation, I think there would be a big, it would help with the change and help with definitely adopting and getting people on board. When you kick in, and this is kind of just encapsulating these 3 points, when you kick in with the first process and, you know, the users are looking at it and they're going, yeah, hey, I've never seen it like as a digital process before. And it's great. I know exactly what I have to do. I know what the next actor in the process has to do. And then you report back to management saying, here are the results, and they're fed back on a real-time basis. And I go, okay, now do you see how good that is? Fantastic. And we're actually going to tweak it to make it even better. You know, it's incredible. Like that, all of this, and this is not based upon heavy analytics. This is just based upon information gathering.
Right. And then for those next processes that you start to develop from that initial one as well, I think the change management just goes much faster because there's a familiarity with the tools, right? So it's not like you're dealing with a different user interface each time with a different system and a different navigation. It's all within, you know, the FlowForma forms are going to look the same. And then for the reporting side of things, the Power BI report navigation is going to be exactly the same. So that part's really huge as well.
And customized to individual organizations in terms of the language, everything that's required that makes it feel comfortable. It can be done here, which is pretty unique, right? Sort of the best of both worlds around a platform that is going to be supported and you know, run in a way that's constantly going to be improved, but still the flexibility to customize.
And on that exact scenario, you've got this continuous, you know, the cycle of improvement. So kicking it off is the tough bit, getting it started. But once you've started turning that wheel, you've got to keep continuously improving. Now, this is, and again, you guys would have come across this so much where, right, we've started, guys, you know, we're climbing that hill at the moment, but hey, let's just keep going. We got to just keep going. Got to keep the wheel turning. One of the examples I would have come across, it was really straightforward one. It was an organization we were dealing with, a pharmaceutical organization who were using FlowForma primarily at the start just for onboarding people, and but they realized really quickly when they were looking at the process that they could have a portion of the activities as parallel steps, and they'd never thought about this. They would just, because there was always these files that was going from this department to that department, spreadsheets moving around the organization. And then they realized they could do 3 or 4 of the processes or the steps in the process as a parallel. I mean, I'm sure you've got tons of examples of this.
Yeah, you know, we have a financial services company that we work with, and it was the exact same thing. They started with one department, and they're like, you know, I bet we can automate this. And they started going down that road, right, around let's develop the process. And I find this continuous improvement, this piece ties in 2 different ways for organizations. And this financial services company actually did it both ways. Is it started with one department that had multiple processes. So then there's a continuous improvement within the department around let's do one process at a time, we'll build on it. But then it actually expanded into multiple departments, right? So now you have multiple departments and they're able to improve collectively across the organization because there's more stakeholders. And it's such a great example. And even, you know, we started with operations and engaging some of their external stakeholders, and it's went into their HR department, and now they're they're actually going to utilize this combination of FlowForma and Power BI to eliminate their existing HR system. So just because they're like, hey, we can do everything here and we can customize it in our way, in the way we want. So great example.
Yeah, we're familiar with that. Yeah. Yeah, and well, speaking of examples, Cam, you've got a couple of examples that you'd like to run through. I mean, Cam's just going to pick off a couple of examples of clients that the guys have dealt with, and then also have a demonstration of some of the types of dashboards that you might have. So if you want to just present there, Cam.
Yeah, you're able to see my screen, Shay?
Yep.
No.
Oh,
okay.
I think it looks good on our end here about the Alberta Energy Service Company.
Okay, good. Go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So what we have here today on the case study side of things is we have two examples of processes where what we've done is we've taken FlowForma conforms and combined those with Power BI reports. So really what we're looking to do here today is to demonstrate the power that you can see from connecting the data input capabilities of something like FlowForma with the storytelling and the reporting capabilities of Power BI. So sort of that input and output scenario. And really these abilities only exist because FlowForma does give you that full control of your data. So you can, choose and decide exactly where you want it held. And that means you can choose exactly what you want to do with it from a reporting perspective. So to have, tools like FlowForma on the process side to data storage within Azure and SharePoint to the reporting in Power BI, sort of gives you that complete control over all of the key aspects of your workflow from start to finish, which we obviously see as extremely important. And so the first example that we have here is a private equity-backed oil and gas service company that's based out of Alberta. And so we started with them in their quality assurance department because what they were doing actually is they were the ones that were tracking instances of policy non-conformance that was occurring out in the field. So, if somebody didn't follow a proper procedure or a piece of equipment had broken down, there's a process that had to be done to log information about that as well as to report back on it. And so previously they had been doing that using a combination of Microsoft Excel, Access, and Microsoft Word to prepare those reports. And then all of that information was having to be, communicated to the various stakeholders by, sending emails, using shared drives, that sort of thing. And really what that required is a lot of sort of timely communications to swap the documents back and forth, as well as actually the necessity to enter the information multiple times because you're preparing a report that's for the single particular instance that perhaps you're sharing with the organization or the site or perhaps the vendor versus the log of information where maybe you want to be able to investigate and explore all of those trends. And so what we did is we took what they have and we decided to create a new state, which was to use FlowForma forms as the input mechanism for all of that information, paired with the document generation capabilities so that we could generate those single reports automatically, and then have Power BI be the mechanism for reporting as an organization, site, or department for those higher level metrics. So really what that came down to is that all the layers of reporting could all be achieved from one single point of entry as opposed to having to separately type out reports and separately fill information into a log. And so I'll demonstrate now exactly what that looks like. So I've just switched over to the non-conformance report. So as mentioned, the field would be the ones that are kickstarting this process. So the field would, have an instance occur out on site that they're required to report on. They would have options like, who was the particular entity, when was the date that this occurred, what's the division involved, and then some of that other more key information like who's the technician, how long has it been down for, any particular information about the equipment, and then to sort of log the the specifics about what has occurred. And for them, that goes through a workflow where once the field reports on it, quality assurance then receives that information and does an assessment of themselves. Because ultimately they have to decide, is there something about our process that needs to change through corrective action? Does this implicate our assessments of the various risks and so forth? And so via FlowForma, this is how they input all of that information. And then the single reports are actually generated automatically directly out of FlowForma using the document generation capabilities. So if they needed to send for that particular form a report to the site that just says, here's a record of what occurred on your site, they have that ability to do it automatically. And additionally, for those folks that need to see the information at maybe a bit higher level, because you have control of that data, we can bring that data into something like Power BI, and then you can see much broader reporting in terms of your instances of non-conformance across the entire organization. And then once it's in Power BI, you have so many capabilities from, if you're interested, for instance, maybe you're the person that's in charge of the drilling department and you want to see your investigation status, you would just be able to come into here and have your report filter to show you, in the drilling department or in the drilling division, sorry, you've actually got 8 overdue and here's a breakdown of your status. And so all of these statuses here can actually be tied to the status of the FlowForma form. So you can track each step of the way for the users that are filling out the forms, as well as the people that are overseeing the process. And so you can do that within Power BI at a high level when it comes to the reporting. So this would be more of an executive view, but there also may be scenarios where you want to see those details, and any of that information that you saw in the FlowForma form previously, like for instance, these overdue items that are highlighted in red, you'd have another tab that you could go to that would be more of a detailed view, which would show you, okay, this is my overdue report. This is what we want to look at on a weekly or even a daily basis to make sure we're making track and correcting the instances that have occurred on our site. And then obviously within Power BI, you have all of that filtering capability if you're interested in seeing, everything that's occurred on a particular site perhaps, or everything in the last, for a specific time period. That's when you can really start to use the information that's being logged through FlowForma to assess the company or as a whole, or identify potentially if there's a problem, say with a particular customer or with a particular division of the business.
So this is great, Cam, and I want to highlight, like, so often you hear about garbage in, garbage out, right? Well, our analytics is only as good as the data coming in, and you can see how in the FlowForma form, you can have goalposts around, like, or guardrails around, this is the information that we need, and you can even set it up so they can't move forward until they put that information in, or you can give more flexibility so you can at least track what we're missing. But all of a sudden the guardrails are up, exactly how the information's coming in. If you hire a new person, there's clarity around, you go here and it's really self-explanatory. And then the reporting piece is, the information is valid, and the advanced reporting capabilities of FlowForma make it really easy to bring in this structured data. Now it's housed in your environment, and now you can change this reporting. Maybe there's a board or a CEO who's like, I need this information. Great, we can give you a high level trend on how things are evolving. We can do some forecasting. Down, same level, same data set can be at the very detailed level that's being showed here for an operator. I just need to know in my area what's overdue. Like when I come in each morning, where am I going? Because what's the most important thing? And it's all real-time reporting, and that, if you think about how this was done before, it was some combination of somebody probably writing some info down on paper, then getting that transferred into an Excel document, then getting forwarded and put into through email, sent to somebody who's going to now upload it into a shared file. The clarity around what's in there is not clear, and people are just constantly searching for info, right? And that completely goes away. So from a time savings perspective, I mean, the quality of the information is better by probably hard to put a number, but let's say, you know, it is incredibly like 100% better in terms of quality. And we know that it's saving, you know, 60% of time from a just time savings perspective. So just to give you an idea of ROI is pretty significant in this case.
So the need to put together your monthly reports and your weekly reports, and you don't have to put them together anymore. They're just there. They're just done. The answers are there in front of you, always. Yeah. I mean, obviously you're going to still have your meetings and so on, but you're dealing with data that you can just walk in and have an impromptu meeting on the data because, hey, something significant came up today, you know, instead of waiting to get it reported on.
Exactly. And that lag of like, hey, here's what happened last week. And people who are doing the work are like, yeah, I know I had to deal with that last week. You know, what's happening this week? Well, I'll let you know in a week. Well, that's not helpful.
Yeah, that is an important one to mention as well, is with the ability to connect with things like Azure and to use the advanced reporting features that FlowForma has, you can actually get these Power BI reports to not just be, you know, periodic up to the hour. You can actually get them to real time, so that the moment a change occurs inside of FlowForma, it's automatically represented in Power BI.
And of course, these can look and feel whichever way you like, right, Cam?
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, there's tons of variability. We have some other examples actually, so I can switch over into the next one, and then we also have a few other Power BI examples that we can show. I'll just hop back over into, oh, hit the wrong one there. So the next example that we have is for Morgan Construction Environmental. So they're a Western Canadian construction company. And so the current state for them is that we actually worked with, we started with their recruitment team. And so what their recruitment team was doing is they would receive position requests from the field, essentially saying, you know, these are all of the personnel that we require for us to be able to do our work on the site. And then it was the recruitment's team responsibility to track all of these requests and then fulfill the onboarding from start to finish, to ensure that, you know, from the moment field said that, you know, we need somebody that can drive an excavator and we need them tomorrow, to, you know, maybe projects that are a little bit more planned ahead that says, you know, we need 50 or 100 people in 3 months time because we've just won a new project. They were the ones that were responsible for delivering that. And because the business grew so fast, they had initially been tracking all of this information within Excel. And so they grew so fast that they actually have, I think it was around the number of 15 people that are going into this same Excel spreadsheet to track exactly each individual person's progress in terms of the onboarding process. And so and also similar to the first case study, they also did have a wide range of reporting requirements that they had to fulfill as well, because they needed to be able to then take all of those individual onboarding instances and be able to summarize that and say, you know, for this particular site, you know, here's the 10 positions that you've requested, and, you know, we found people for 5 of them. We're still, you know, looking for 4 of them, and maybe we have 1 person who's ready to come on site as early as tomorrow, so that the other areas of the business can also plan accordingly. And so also similar to the first case study, what we did is we created a solution where we connected the FlowForma forms with Power BI in order to give them this reporting. And so here's just an example of the way that the onboarding process would look. So you'll see we have the using core functionality within FlowForma, like the ability to have, you know, automated employee numbers, to, you know, basic information like their first and last name, to any of that other important information like what's the type of hire that they are, maybe their educational background, contact information, and so forth. And then once you have that sort of initial information, then they go through the actual onboarding process itself. So you know, the review by the person's manager, to the orientations that they have to fulfill. In the case of Morgan, there was a lot of requirements in the sense that because they're going on site, they had to track that they had all these orientations. They have to have certain courses completed before they can work, and they have to be submitted to a drug test. And so because they had to keep track of all of these things, a process like FlowForma was obviously very important for them on a detailed level. But then also, if we take it back up to the higher level, an executive or a site foreman really just wants to see how they're doing on an overall basis. And you can do that same thing with the flexibility of Power BI to give them that sort of macro view where they can see, here's how many people that we have waiting in orientation for our department. Here's how many people that are, that we need to talk to IT or HR because there's requirements that are being fulfilled, and that's holding that person up from being able to enter the field.
And Cam, could I jump in? Because I think it's an important piece around the process. I mean, this is an onboarding process that I think a lot of people are familiar with, but I want to highlight that this is a great example where maybe you've been in a scenario where you've optimized your process and we have a swim lane chart up on the wall and it's like, hey, okay, here's what we're doing. But then 3 months later, it's like, well, how are we doing with our process? Is it working? And your ability to really answer that is difficult, right? Whereas here you can be like, all right, we're tracking exactly how long it takes for somebody to go through steps 1 through 6 to get onboarded. And you can actually track how long is it taking in each of these steps, which ones maybe needs to be optimized. And more importantly, if I'm a person in the field and I'm waiting for somebody, if I get the answer, well, it's in process, that's not helpful because I know they need 10 different certificates. So have they got 9 out of the 10 or have they got 1 out of the 10? And those are the types of things that now you can actually track and bring this process to life in a way that I think is really, really interesting. And the dynamic nature of FlowForma means, well, if I'm hiring 5 different positions that need 5 different sets of orientation, you can actually have that dynamically change in your forms. The correct information is there and away you go. So I just wanted to add that in because I think it's a great example that can be that would work across not just onboarding's one, but I mean this works for QA/QC, for safety, for operations, for even finance and payments. There's so many examples where a similar type of approach is required.
And a small thing on that as well is when you go down the digitized process route, you also have the ability to have that virtual tap on the shoulder.
Yeah.
So that if something is, stalled for any reason, it's in a step for, longer than it should be because you can tell the process, hey, this should be only there for a day, 2 days, whatever. You get a notification go, hey, you're meant to be taking care of this. And then you can escalate it and you can actually reassign those steps as well. So you've got a full automation going on with the process, data being gathered well, but you've then got the reporting element that's showing you, okay, here we have a bit of an issue here because we've got 7 in orientation and 5 are awaiting IT and HR requirements. That shouldn't be the case. We should have nearly like 1 or 2 in each of those, that type of thing, where if you have your, KPIs on those, they can be added into this. Isn't that right?
Absolutely, yeah. Like to have it at both those layers, the status tracking side of it, so you can see exactly where you're at a certain time, and also from a kind of a look back perspective, like are you actually improving in how fast that you can get people through your processes as well, right? Because now that you have the ability to track that information and see, not just that you've onboarded somebody at this particular date, but you can actually see how long were we stuck in each of these steps within FlowForma because you're tracking all that information is extremely important as well, and it does really help you to demonstrate that ROI to the business as well.
Just on the reporting end of it, do you have? I mean, those examples obviously directly correlate back to your customer examples, but do you have any other Power BI? Because I know you can do a hell of a lot with this. Do you have any other examples that you might want to demonstrate or just show even?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've got a couple of examples here. So maybe I'll start, Rick, on the financial side, and we can go there.
Yeah, I can talk through that. So a common financial summary would just be, hey, what's going on from a revenue perspective? Although as you can see, there's lots of other info related to gross margin, profitability, cost of goods sold you can put in. But just to give you a quick idea of what's possible, this is a
Yeah.
revenue versus budget. It's like, hey, how are we doing versus budget? You can see it broken down by a division in this case. So if you wanted to click on Southwest or Central, whichever, you can see quickly, oh, this is how it's been evolving over the year, right? So you can click onto that and see it looks like everything's green there. So that's good news, but you can go up and click on the previous year comparison and quickly get a sense of, okay, how are we doing compared to last year? And now same, little different story around, oh, okay, we're actually down. So you can use that red, yellow, green to highlight quickly, where do I need to put my attention? And just anybody who's tried to use financial statements in Excel before know that this is very difficult and it's quite time consuming trying to pull this into different tables. And Cam, as a CPA, I know has spent more than enough time going through financials. So that's one example, and then we have another example on an agent scorecard we can show as well.
Yeah. This is it's a much nicer way to view financial information than a 40 or 100 page financial statement. That's for sure.
As well as that, I mean, just as you're pulling up this report, the fact that you're gathering information and you have it categorized and it's all normalized correctly because it's been gathered with rules and regulations, you now can feel confident about your reports.
Exactly right. So this example is a little bit more detailed. So this is a scenario where you're managing a team that does some customer service potential sense of like, how are we doing versus these KPIs, right? And you can see you have targets and you can see very quickly, you can again use color coding to highlight when are we in the green, when are we in the red, how far out are we? And if you click on the details, you can actually get a drill down into each area. And this you can see is actually built on a per day basis, right? So you can get a sense of how are we really. And you can actually change that over time. You can look at monthly or yearly for trends. But I think, if you're having a daily meeting or a daily huddle with people, you can get a sense of, hey, what are we looking at here? And then if you go up to the team agent piece on the filter, here's an example where, okay, I run the customer care team, but what about the specialty care? It's a different group. Okay, well, let's click on that. And now all of a sudden you're changing it right away. And I think this is a good example of different stakeholders getting involved and able to see the things that are most relevant to them. All right. So same look and feel, different groups, maybe even different metrics and KPIs, but very relevant to them. So a couple examples, and like Shay said, we like to talk a lot about the storytelling. Is what is the story you're trying to communicate to stakeholders around success? And getting that information in a structured way. This combination of process automation and interactive reporting, from our perspective, is just this is what companies that are going to be in that top right corner of be able to be proactive and be able to forecast. This is how they're going to do it. This is the world. This is the mechanism and tools to get them into that world.
And they really don't work, they only work hand in hand. So in other words, not much point in gathering clean, tight data if you're not going to report on it, and not much point in reporting on sort of disjointed data, because that's absolutely a fool's errand. It's totally the wrong thing to do. You have it all in tandem, and then you get that continuous improvement going. You get all this nice stuff going. Everybody's happy when they can see the reports. Okay, might like some of the information that they're seeing some of the time, but you got to see it.
Right. Forewarned is forearmed, right? Like at least you can then decide what it is you're going to do about it, because something's trending. And I can't tell you how many times in a construction context, you hear about something, and there was little aspects of it that people sort of knew 3 weeks or a month earlier. And it's like, man, the options available to us a month ago to solve this were so much greater than they are right now. And now it's like, well, now we're just full on firefighting, and there's only 1 or 2 things we can do, versus a month ago we had 5 other options that we could have debated. And that, in a construction context, is a great example where, man, having that report in real time just allows you to solve problems so much more quickly and in a proactive manner.
Yeah. The biggest question that we come across in any of these scenarios is how quickly can we get going on something like this?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I know from the FlowForma end of things, putting the process together, I mean, you literally can be up and running within a couple of weeks. You know, technically you can be up and running within an hour, but okay, to get your first process going on, you know, give yourself a few weeks because you're going to have to learn a few things. And then, I mean, from the reporting end, how quickly are you up and running?
Yeah, you know, with the structured data coming in from FlowForma, you could have a couple reports built within a week very easily. You know,
Okay.
honestly, same thing within, if you just had a couple simple reports, you could probably do it in a couple hours as a starting point. Just say, okay, I want to see how this is trending over time. Okay. Literally a
Yeah.
couple hours and away we go. And then there's always formatting and pieces of that, but it isn't something where it's like, oh, this is 6 months away and it's going to take all this time. It's like you can get up and running with a process very, very quickly because everything
Yeah.
is integrated. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great that sort of in this day and age, from a technology point of view, you're now no longer in a position where you've got a big project you have to take on, and it is that, you know, when you go attack things with the one process at a time, and I would sort of put it into the same scenario here. You got one process at a time, leading to report, leading to a dashboard, you know, and then evolve that, and then you can grow that. You can have many processes, many reports, but it's all, you can do it incrementally. You were saying, or we were alluding to earlier on, it's not like putting in that ERP system. And old IT projects used to be like that. It used to be, hey, you know, we need to sit down on this project for weeks before we even kick off anything to talk everything ad infinitum. Now you don't have to do that. And it's a very important message to get across, that this is it with new technology and current technology like FlowForma and the Power BI dashboards and Pound Supply. You can get up and running in the digital transformation arena really quickly, and at a fraction of what you might consider to be costly. Today's been good. I enjoyed that. And guys, I thank everybody for their attendance at today's webinar. I hope you gained something. Let me see. I think the only questions I've been asked was about the timing that I know of. So other than that, anybody who wishes to give this a try, it's a really straightforward scenario. You can actually do this. We have got some great illustrations, great examples. Grab a trial. We'll even do a workshop with you guys, step you through it. Won't leave you on your own. You'll be handheld throughout. Not a problem. We can lift the heavy weights as heavy as you like, get involved as much as you like, with the ultimate goal of digitizing processes, reporting on them, and basically having everybody happy, from users up to management. Rick, Cam, thanks again for today. I don't know if you'd like to sign off by yourselves.
Yeah, no, I agree, Shay. It was a great conversation. Really enjoyed being able to talk in depth about this, and I hope everybody listening found something useful in it to just help them along their journey of digitization. And
just to remind you, there's a tip sheet there available as part of this webinar. So it's I think it's the AIM tip sheet. For not delaying on digitization. The reality is, you know, everybody's going to be digitized in 5 years, but those that digitize today, they'll have 5 years of data and 5 years of improvements on. So, hey, get stuck in now. Guys, thank you very much, and take care.
Have a great day.
Great. Thanks very much.